Hey guys, what's going on? It's me, Jay. I wanted to do this short little video on the movie Black Panther that came out in 2018. That was starring the late great Chadwick Boseman as T'Challa, aka the Black Panther, and Michael B. Jordan as uh, Eric Killmonger. It also starred Angela Bassett and Forrest Whitaker and Daniel Kaluuya and Lalita Wright as Siri, the sister. It was produced and directed by Ryan Coogler, who also um, produced Creed and Fruitvale Station, which were both movies that also starred Michael B. Jordan. And I just wanted to do this video because um, Chadwick Boseman passed away, and also because I really enjoyed this film. I'm not really gonna do a blow by blow of the movie. I'm just gonna talk a little bit about some of my favorite parts and what I think the impact of a film like this is on the film industry. My most favorite part of this was when um, T'Challa and Killmonger were fighting over um, their ascension to the throne in the fictional nation of Wakanda. They had this ritual where the two contestants um, for the throne of Wakanda would do battle in like an MMA uh, type battle, and that was my favorite scene. My other favorite scene was when they went to Hong Kong, and it was sort of like a 007 movie. Female bodyguards of T'Challa, played by Danai Gurira, who also played in the Tupac biopic. Um, All Eyes on Me, and is a star of the AMC series The Walking Dead. She protects him. She protects him from being killed. But one thing I found interesting about this film was that there's no real bad guy in this film, because yes, Killmonger is sort of the bad guy, but he's telling his narrative is different from that of T'Challa. He represents uh, in the film the Black American narrative, which is a stranger from Wakanda. His point of view, he would like to use the main mineral of Wakanda that gives Wakanda its strength, the vibranium, and which also gives the Black Panther suit its strength to help people within the African diaspora, specifically Oakland, California, where he comes from. He would like to use that mineral to better people in the African diaspora. But T'Challa and the other um, people in Wakanda, they don't agree with that, because to them, if you call attention to what makes Wakanda special. Now, a little bit of the backstory. Um, Wakanda is hit by this meteorite um, that contains the mineral vibranium. But the people of Wakanda, they hide behind a shield that the rest of the world doesn't actually know. Excuse me, that they have this advanced technology, and it's basically an advanced civilization. But other societies don't really know that, so it prevents them, all other societies, from invading them and trying to steal this mineral. Now, eventually, they become hip to it, and they want to steal this mineral. Uh, the organization Shield that goes against the Avengers, they want to steal this mineral to try and get a hold of it and try to use it, just like Killmonger does. But for Killmonger, he wants to use it to help the betterment of people in the African diaspora, where he comes from, because apparently his father had gotten wind of this and wanted to do the exact same thing, but um, T'Challa's father didn't want that, and T'Challa's father actually killed Killmonger's father. The beginning opens up with a scene where Killmonger's father is killed by T'Challa's father. So it's basically an inter-family rivalry. Well, at the same time, is the backdrop to uh, the, the rivalry of like African Americans versus actual Africans. Now, you bring this to the real world, and it's kind of the same thing, where Africa does have valuable resources, but those valuable resources, such as oil and diamonds and all that stuff, is actually exploited, was actually exploited by European and Arab conquerors, not to the benefit of Africans, but to their detriment. And it's kind of the same thing here. And this is the kind of thing that T'Challa wants to prevent as the leader of Wakanda. He doesn't want Wakanda to be exploited. And he knows that if they were to find out that Wakanda has this, the European, the American society would exploit this, and Wakanda wouldn't be protected or shielded from this kind of exploitation. Because while they do have a tremendous army, um, it will be too much for Wakandans to defend against these other nations that will try to attack them. So eventually, without giving it away, um, you guys have to watch it if you didn't see it. But T'Challa does come around in some ways to become more engaged with the rest of the world. But yeah, this movie was pretty good. It was the second highest grossing movie of 2018, behind Infinity War, which was the prequel to this, which actually showed the murder of T'Challa's father. And it was also one of the first African American movies that I remember seeing that had a lot of positive images of African Americans, showing Africans and African Americans as strong leaders, as productive people, not as crackheads, not as ghetto gaggers, not as um, street thugs, but as regular productive people. It was, of course, riding the wave of Marvel movies and comic book movies that I talked about before in my other videos that really started with Iron Man and then Avengers, the original Avengers in 2012, which kind of changed the face of movies because from that point on, all you saw was these comic book movies that were connected within the greater Marvel universe. But there was never any all African American type movies like that. And it was also the last Marvel movie, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section. To feature Stan Lee as a cameo. Stan Lee was a cameo in all the Marvel movies, but he sadly passed away in 2018. He was the creator of Marvel Comics, him and Jack Kirby. They wrote all the Silver Age 60s comic book series like Hulk, Iron Man, things like that. You know, stories like that, and even Black Panther, which was of course inspired by the 1960s activist group, which was centered in Oakland, California. And Michael B. Jordan says that to get ready for this part, he read the speeches of Marcus Garvey, of Malcolm X, of Tupac Shakur, and other black nationalist leaders to really get a sense of the whole debate that has really been the center of African American political discourse in this country, which is should African Americans be independent and self sufficient from white aid and white help, or should they engage with the greater American and global society? Um, some of the people that have represented Killmonger's view are people like Malcolm X, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and Marcus Garvey, other people that have represented the type of viewpoint that T'Challa had, which is the more integrationist viewpoints, have been individuals such as Martin Luther King Jr., W.E.B. Du Bois, and mainstream civil rights leaders. Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton. They've represented the sort of integrationist view that African nations, in particular African American nations, should engage with the greater white society and the greater global society more so than be secluded and separatists. And like I said, we saw this throughout African American political history. In the '60s, most famously when this was written, um, uh, people such as Malcolm X represented the separatist part, and people such as um, Martin Luther King Jr. represented the integrationist side. So, just like how in X-Men, you've replaced African Americans with the mutants of X-Men, Magneto represented Malcolm X's side, and Professor Xavier represented the side of Martin Luther King Jr., just like this. T'Challa represented uh, Martin Luther King's side, whereas Killmonger represents Malcolm X's side. So even though Killmonger was the villain of this piece, um, he was the hero to some that um, you know uh, agreed with his political viewpoints. So even though it was a fantasy piece and it was speculative fiction, it kind of intersected with current politics and just black politics over in general. It intersected with black political debates. It was really no bad guy. It was just different points of view because eventually there is a scene, and I'll steal a quote from Killmonger's dialogue in the film, where T'Challa says that they'll lock him up, and he says that he'd rather die like his ancestors from they jumped from the walls of slave ships because they knew that death was better than bondage. In other words, he'd rather die than be a slave or a prisoner. So you essentially have these two men that are cousins coming to a civil agreement that seeing that neither one is right or wrong, that it was simply a matter of opinion. Now, segue that into this argument. Since the untimely death of Chadwick Boseman 2 days ago from colon cancer, um, a lot of people have been saying, well, should the part of T'Challa be um, recast? And my opinion is no, that it shouldn't. Um, eventually you will have to do another movie because it's Marvel and it's Disney, and they're after that money, they're after that cheese. But you don't want to do it right away because this film is a very important piece of cinematic history, and it was an experience going to see this film. Never have I ever encountered a situation um, that where there was such mania and such hype surrounding a film. Now, sure, The Last Jedi came out the same year, and there was a lot of hype surrounding that, but it ended up being a disappointment. With this film, it delivered, and it wasn't as divisive as The Last Jedi, you know. And overall, I really give this film uh, a 7 out of 10 or an 8 out of 10. The only thing I will say is that um, I'll say that's a disagreement. Why I don't give it a 10 out of 10 is simply because there are times when the dialogue does drag a bit, and it can seem a little bit slow at times, especially if you don't have a previous knowledge like I didn't about the characters and the story arc, and only because it too is not self-contained. It's a chapter in a greater story, and sometimes when it's a chapter in a greater story, you have to see the the entire Marvel series to truly grasp what was actually going on. And because I didn't, and I saw it as just a viewer of this film alone, uh, at first it was really hard for me to understand what was really going on. So that kind of took away from my viewing experience. But I remember going to see this film in 2018 and just being astonished by the special effects, the fight scenes, and the action scenes. The one scene where they're in Hong Kong again and Black Panther jumps on the car. It was just amazing. I never really saw anything like this because usually comic book heroes and heroes in general in speculative fiction are always almost always white, almost never people of color, and this was the first time ever that a serious um, action hero was produced um, on screen of an African American. You had others like Media Man or Blank Man and other silly type stuff, but this was taken serious. This was treated with a lot of respect, and he was even nominated for an Oscar. I loved it. I loved it, you guys. But again, like I said, I deduct 2 points off because had I been more engaged with it, I would have understood it better. But that was just me as a viewer. Nothing really against the film itself. You know. But anyway, guys, let me know your thoughts on the film. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And I didn't put any of the spoilers in the film in the video. Really saying what really happened because if in case you haven't seen it, just that one little line or whatever. But don't forget to like and subscribe and ring the bell for notifications when I do more movie reviews. Peace.